Beverley Nichols lives in a cottage on Ham Common. He was the golden boy of his generation in the Oxford of the 20s. He knew everybody even then and went on to lead the life of a successful journalist and playwright. He is now nearly 80, so he has had ample opportunity to reflect on the pains and pleasures of his life.
If you look at the water, you'll see what I mean. I do wish you could have seen it in May.
But don't you open the garden to the public then?
Yes, I do every Sunday.
And that's for charity, Beverley?
Yeah.
Yeah. I must come along.
Well, do. I wish you would.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing your lovely cats now, Beverley.
Well, I'm sure they're looking forward to seeing you. But you know what cats are. They may be temperamental. This is Leo.
Yes, lovely. And right by your piano.
Yes, yes.
Which I imagine means a lot to you, or am I wrong?
Well, it's of course the most important thing in the room for me, because it's a reminder that my life is a complete failure. I think. Total failure. Leo, get out of the way. Wait a minute now. He doesn't like being disturbed. You can't play the piano with a cat, though.
He's going very nicely for you.
As a matter of fact, I can't play the piano at all now, because about 3 weeks ago I had an operation on this finger. But I never wanted to do anything else.
Why didn't you carry on with it?
God, I suppose, in various ways. You see, if you're going to play the piano, the last thing you want to do is to go to a public school. You don't want to go to Marlborough or Balliol, as I did afterwards. And all the time that I ought to have been practicing arpeggios from the age of 8 or 9, I was standing on windy fields in Wiltshire in goalposts, hoping to God that nobody threw a ball at me, or on a cricket field. And I think mankind is divided into two sections, people who can throw balls and people who can't, and I just couldn't. And I had a very difficult father, as you may realize, and he had a great hatred of anybody doing what they wanted, and he knew that the one thing I wanted was to play the piano, and so he stopped me. But even now I try. You see, I can't stretch an octave. Let's just look, see if anything happens.
Well, that sounds very good to me.
Not to me.
You've blamed your father for quite a lot that went wrong in your life, haven't you?
Yes, I thought I'd exorcised him in a book that I wrote called Father Figure, because he was it sounds a terrible thing to say, but I did try to get rid of him.
You actually tried to kill him,
yes.
didn't you?
The first time was when I was quite a small, schoolboy, because you see, he was in fact murdering my mother slowly. It would be too macabre and too distressing, I think, not only for anybody who's watching, but for me to go into all the details of my childhood. But the first time I ever saw him, the first time I remember seeing him, was at the bottom of the stairs, covered with blood, and just about to have delirium tremens. And that went on throughout most of his life. And if you are I'm not an absolute hippopotamus of insensitivity. I'm trying to say I was a rather sensitive little boy, and that does have an appalling effect on you.
But Beverley, if you had managed to kill your father, I can't imagine what you'd have done then.
I still don't quite know. You see, it would have been, I suppose it would have haunted one all one's life, and yet one would have had a totally different life. If I had been haunted, I could have exorcised the ghost with music. I could have looked after my mother. I'd have had a totally different life. But you must believe me when I say that I'm not the sort of person that would wish to do a thing like that without very good reason, because I think that there's only one sin in life, and that is cruelty. I think you can have a lot of things which are illegal, and very regrettable, but if they have not got the element of cruelty in them, then I don't think they can be regarded as sin. Well, I was confronted with cruelty on a scale that it's very difficult for a normal, nice, charming person like you who's been brought up in a normal way to understand. You see, I think perhaps it's all summed up in a little story. I believe I told it in the book. When I was a little boy, coming home from preparatory school, I went to, I think, 14 preparatory schools, because we always had to be changing house because of my father.
He was a drinker, wasn't he?
Oh, yes, on such a scale that it's incredible that he remained alive. And when I was going home, I had a little boy who also, a friend of mine, who also played the piano, and he said to me, "Why don't you come in and have tea with my people?" And I said, and this has remained in my mind for always, but I said, "Have you warned your mother?" And he said, "What do you mean, warned her?" And I said, "But has she been warned that somebody may come in?" And then I saw he didn't know what I was talking about. Well, what I meant, of course, was that nobody could possibly come into our house unless one was quite sure that nobody was lying on the floor, nobody was being sick at the bottom of the stairs, nobody was going to come down roaring obscenities covered with blood.
If you could consider ending your father's life, could you have considered ending your mother's life when she was suffering?
Yes. Yes, I could, because you see, this really brings us down to a rather fundamental question, doesn't it, as to what extent life is sacred. And I think life is only sacred if some sort of benefit can be got out of it, but not when life has become intolerable. I think my mother was afraid of death. I don't think I am. It's awfully difficult to say.
Do you mean you're not now, or that you've never been afraid of death?
I'm certainly not afraid of death now. I mean, one's been so near to it on so many occasions and wished for it with such passion.
Why did you wish for it with passion?
Well, because I had this unspeakable disease about 4 years ago, and I was going through a slow crucifixion for a year and a half. I thought of nothing but suicide.
Because of what, the pain?
Because of the pain. I mean, when I say pain, I talk about pain, which I don't normally do, otherwise nobody would ask one out to dinner if we would never stop talking about pain. But, I mean, in those days I couldn't go out to dinner because I would have to get up suddenly and stuff a napkin in my mouth to stop myself from screaming. But I don't think most people know what pain is. Not pain with a real capital P. They've broken their legs and they've had double pneumonia and they've had shingles and all those sort of little minor details. But they haven't had the ultimate crucifixion of the unspeakable disease, which you know what I'm talking about.
Which is cancer. Can you describe the pain?
I can describe it very clearly because I've seen it. I've actually seen pain as an entity. It was after the first operation I had, which lasted 9 hours, and in which a great deal of me was cut out. And as I was coming to, I had this vision, and it isn't absolute nonsense because other people have had it too. And the vision of pain with a capital P is you're in a room or some sort of building, and in the distance, about 20 yards away, there's a cluster of serpents in various very horrible shades of green and dirty black and arsenic pink. Did you know pink is arsenic? The colour of arsenic. And there are all these creatures. I've seen them very, very clearly, and they become aware of one's presence, and they slowly glide across the floor. And then they enter your body through your legs and go up here and through your body, and eventually they come to here. And then when they get to the brain, they stop. and then they come sliding out again, flickering their tongues. And during that time you are being crucified to an extent that it's difficult for a normal person to understand. And then they go back and retreat again, curl up in their slimy heap, and then perhaps the nurse comes in and gives you another jab. Well, that is pain.
Did you think of killing yourself?
For a year and a half, I thought of nothing else.
Why didn't you, Beverley?
Well, because simply because there are no techniques for suicide, as I think there should be. As you know, the Voluntary Euthanasia Society, the whole idea is that when life becomes absolutely intolerable, you should be at the liberty you should be able to terminate it and to go out with dignity. One of the most appalling things, I think, about really severe illness and pain is not only the actual horror of the pain itself, but the fact that eventually it destroys your brain.
But how are you going to be able to administer anything on yourself? I mean, would you...
Well, that's awfully difficult. It's got to be gone into. Some of the ways that I thought of committing suicide, and I thought about it almost exclusively for a year and a half, were really quite funny. But I hope it hasn't totally destroyed one's sense of humour, but I know there was one thing. I had an overcoat, and I got a lot of lead weights, and I decided to put the overcoat on. It is really rather black humour, this, and get into my car and motor down to Land's End in Cornwall, where I'd had a lot of very happy times as a boy. And I should also have a bottle of vodka, and for safety, a bottle of rum as well, and a huge thing of tablets which I could have got. And then I should have put on my overcoat and gone down to a cliff and thought some suitable thoughts, and swallowed the stuff and gone into the sea. And if that didn't finish one off, I don't know what would have done. But
if you had managed to kill yourself, well, that would have been fine because it was your responsibility. But could you have passed on that responsibility to somebody else, say, a doctor or a nurse?
Oh, yes, I think very definitely. In fact, I have dropped hints to that effect, but naturally no doctor is able to do it now, as the law stands at present. All I'm suggesting is that when life does become intolerable, as it can be, one should be allowed to reject it with dignity, with efficiency, under proper medical supervision, and after all the legal formalities have been carried out. See, I think you've got to put death in its place, not be dominated by any moral or religious prejudices you may have about it.
But that was in 1974, and it's 78 now. Wouldn't you have regretted missing all these years if you had died then?
Well, of course, that's the $1,000 question. I think in order to answer it, I've got to look out of the window, because I do love my garden very much, and in about very shortly, the camellias will be coming out, and the daffodils. And I shall burst into tears if I go on like this, but I mean, I naturally would have lost certain miraculous springs. I'd have also lost a damn nasty drought, but I should have lost those things, and as I say, it is the $1,000 question. When life comes back to you, and when it's endurable, and even though you can't get down on your knees and dig in the garden as you used to do, you still have, I hope, the delight and the occasional ecstasy. So I suppose, thank you, dear, I think probably I'm glad I didn't.